meeting to order for the Crestview Charter Review Committees for Thursday, August the 3rd, 2017. Glad everyone is able to be able to participate today.
Yeah, is it working?
The first
Cable wasn't.
next item for consideration is approval of minutes for July 13, 2017. Of all regular minutes, is there action?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve the minutes.
We have a second?
I'll second
July
that.
13th.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion, comments? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. The next item is interactive rectangular committee discussion. On short order, this works well. Teresa, good job, thanks for setting this up. Dr. Getch will not be with us tonight, as you all know by now, but Teresa says that he has stated he would like to make a presentation before the committee.
Either the 17th or the 31st of August.
Okay, and when we get down further in the agenda, then Teresa can break us on that and see what's the best time. So we'll get directly into the interactive roundtable committee discussion. And if it's acceptable to the committee, I'll start to my right, we'll work around and back to the chair. And I think if anyone during each other's comments, if we want to follow that, or we can just start at this to my right, and then we'll interact as we go, depending on what the speaker or committee person has to say at that time. We'll take it like that. So just has to be recognized, and we'll move like that. Is that acceptable to the committee? Okay. We'll start with our Vice Chairman, Mr. Lane.
Thank you, Chair. Everybody, what I've done over the past week and a half is I've actually looked through the proposed charter and what was proposed for the actual replacements and the questions and how they had to be worded, like Mr. Lux explained to us at the last meeting. I think it would be conducive to this meeting if we kind of went through either the old charter and started lining out different things, or went through the proposed charter and you know, what we agree with, what we don't agree with.
My thoughts are, since the old charter, we've all agreed that needs some serious updating. And I think the previous charter that was recommended to the city council and that would public hearing and approval of that, we'll just go right into that document. But if anybody would like to digress to the old charter, feel free to do so. But, okay.
I mean, would it be best if we went paragraph by paragraph, and if somebody does by chance have an issue, or we can specifically speak on that paragraph as we come to it, you know, or page by page. Then I mean, I found nothing on page one that
Okay,
really
are we going to
the proposed
charter or the ordinance?
the
Okay.
charter.
Article 4, mine looks a little, okay. Okay, I've got mine all marked up. If we go, matter of fact, I'll just go back a little further to the top, and if anyone wants to kind of update if they see fit, the proceeding will just go up to the date, section 3.02, election and terms, and we can just go ahead and circle, if you will, highlight it any way you like to. There's highlighters available there. It is the date, so if we want to use this as a guide, we can use it as a guide. Okay. And
if we have any discrepancies on either the first or second page, I do see some red.
I have some things as it relates to power and duties of the mayor. That's the first office that's mentioned there. And what I see in the new charter, the duties of the mayor, is pretty well in alignment with the duties of the mayor in this old document. Pretty well follow along that. Except in the powers of the mayor in the proposed charter from years ago, he actually has additional powers that are granted in this charter. I have talked to the mayor, and hopefully we can get it in. There's some questions that I would like to ask him about, to the mayor himself, about giving up his police and authority powers to have more power and authority as it relates into intervention under the new charter. So I can only get that from him. But I see it allows him much more time under the new charter to do the business of the mayor and not supervising the police and fire department.
Correct, I definitely second that.
Okay, so we just got on the next page, going down to 3-4, I've just highlighted the duties of the mayor under the new charter. And he has pretty extensive powers given to him.
May I ask a question on page 2? In parenthesis 2 at the bottom of the page, does the mayor, under this proposal, the mayor would preside at the city council?
That's a question I have over when you get into the council's chambers, and I highlighted that because I thought that was a little discrepancy there myself.
Looks
Later over under the council's duties,
The chairman.
the chairman of the council.
Yeah. Well, why is this here?
See, if I may, in this, it explains that he is on the board, or, he sits up there, but he's not going to be a voting member, and that relieves him from sunshine as well, because he's not gonna be voting on necessary issues.
Right, but he will not be presiding.
Okay, the word.
Yeah, and I have that circle there, and I think that word needs to be changed to something
Yeah.
else.
Mr. Chairman, may I like to see visual. I like to see things drawn out, and I have a flow chart here of the offices. This is just something that I was thinking about. I know this is getting us off course from going item
No,
by
I
item.
don't think so. I think that's right. I think that's.
And so I'll give each one of you a copy of what I put together here. And I have a copy for the record as well.
One
One more.
I'm not gonna give the two.
I can provide copies to the media as well if you'd like to follow along.
Yes.
Moderator.
So we were talking about the responsibilities of the mayor, and the what I was kind of thinking is to serve as the meeting moderator rather than the council president fulfilling that role. The mayor could fill that role as the way they do it in other cities. Of course, he would also remain the ceremonial figurehead and the chief of executive during declared times of emergency and martial law. He'd have the ability to veto council ordinances, which could, of course, be overridden with a majority or supermajority, whatever they decided to write in there. Then currently, he has the ability to conduct investigations into allegations of misconduct. And I think it's important to serve as a proper check and balance that he remain or that authority remain with him. And then, of course, as chartered currently, he has the ability to make appointments to the various citizen boards.
Right.
And I also think that's a good function as well. So that's, you know, as far as how the mayor relates. Of course, I've got the city council on there, serving as a policy and budget governance. They, of course, would supervise the city manager, who would supervise the city clerk, the department heads, police chief, and fire chief. And it's important to note, the city manager would have the administrative and operational oversight of the city, and not the city council, of course, and then the general council would remain virtually unchanged. That's just my thoughts I thought I could put out here before we got too much further into,
I
Going item by
think it's
item.
good. I like your chart, and it's better than the one that I did. I took what we had and just redlined it and highlighted it and moved those positions up to make them kind of on equal line. That was provided basic four forms, and this is the council manager form. But you have a better chart than I
I
have.
appreciate that.
So that's good. Any comments about,
I have
the
one.
question?
What about the position of city clerk? Now, she's an elected person, right?
It currently.
Currently.
Current. Oh, okay, so
She will-
we're looking
if
to do away with the elected portion and,
That's correct.
Mhm.
If you
So
follow,
we'll-
if you follow what was recommended in the last election. And could I add a comment in there about qualifications for office holders, the city council mayor and the city clerk? They have to be voting age and a registered voter and live in a certain district, but be a registered voter. That's about the qualifications. And I'm thinking about, Teresa, the city budget somewhere this year is around $34 million.
In the neighborhood, yeah.
Somewhere in that, and there's nothing in the current charter that requires any background whatsoever relates to the clerk's position. No, throwing nothing at the current clerk, because she's elected under the form that we have now. But, with the hired clerk, city council interviewing and a manager interviewing, I'm pretty sure that that person would have some specific qualifications, whatever the job application.
Mr. Chairman, I think when we talk about qualifications, you bring up an important point. As far as the city manager, I think part of our job should be to recommend to the city council that with the office of city manager, there be a master's degree requirement in something relevant to city management and a 10 to 15 years of working experience, having managed cities and other communities successfully, and then bring it here to Crestview. I would not want to see somebody with zero experience become our city manager, of course.
If I may, one thing to double down on that is just to actually put in to where it has to be nationally advertised, so that we are trying to pull from what is possibly out there instead of just from what we currently have.
I agree. That's a good point, Andrew.
Yeah, and, some way, this will be recorded in the minutes, and when we get back to it, we can refer back to those minutes and point out those, qualifications
I do-
that we see fit.
I do think this chart it still definitely falls in line with pretty much what was written. With, some minor adjustment to specific words, like we've already noted, the presides. And I did have one question, and I don't know if it's just because that's how it's written, or when it says good citizenship and exhibit cooperative spirits. When you get into such vague wording, is it really needed, or is it just filler gaps to?
Where is that on this page?
Right here under parentheses alpha 4-01. Good citizenship and who's the judge of that? And how's that determined? So
Maybe it should be maybe something where like a felony, or if something it's measured in a quantity.
then you also get into that when you have to remove from the office due to a conviction or charges or something of that nature. So,
That's good. Okay, so, we continue on as we have, been provided a working copy of a suggested or proposed flow chart. Let's have just kind of a consensus. Is this a workable document for us to move forward with as a committee?
yes,
Absolutely.
yes, they do.
Okay, so,
This is also gonna give something that's going to be able to be a piece that can educate the public as you go
Absolutely.
beyond, even this setting.
okay, I think we've gone through the mayor's discussion very well. If someone would like to, touch on the mayor a little bit more, we'll take time to do that. If not, we'll move to, the next page as, page 4, I guess it is, city council. And I've gone down to, and it was mentioned previously, but I've kind of parentheses down on item 5. It was a suggested, matter of fact, I was for that terminology as administrator, that the last, review committee is, because the city manager had been defeated, put down so many times, thinking a word that would equate to the same, but was maybe softening up a little bit. Well, it might have softened it up a little bit, but it never was able to get on the ballot for a second go-round. So we can't say if it did, it was effective or not. So we might want to decide what terminology the committee can, moving forward, if we would, the committee would rather use administrator, or if we'd rather use the term manager.
The county made that change wisely several years ago from manager to administrator. Same job, just a softer title to the public.
My only concern is that when dealing with municipal government, city administrator usually refers to somebody that works for a strong mayor. City manager usually refers to someone that works for a city council.
As it relates to established government.
And while we're discussing powers and duties of the city council, one thing that I was thinking about that might be helpful, and other municipalities have done this as well, is limit the city council's ability to communicate with city employees. So they should only be communicating with the city manager.
Follow the proper channels.
Exactly.
I think that makes reference and giving instructions to them that they're preventing under this, but maybe it needs to be said more than one time.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about the number 5 there, administrator or
Oh,
manager. We don't need, we need to discuss that before we
yes,
got.
yes. Okay, what are your comments, Gene?
I think, we should go with the term manager, because knowing people, like we all do, someone will pick up on this if we include the term administrator, and they'll say, oh, they're trying to get around the manager kind of thing, by changing the name.
They're trying to trick us.
I understand where you're coming with on that. I think it really comes down to the education piece once we go beyond this setting.
Yeah.
And being able to articulate the job title and I do see what you're saying.
I'm in agreement with using the term city manager, not city administrator.
I go along with that. It didn't help us last week go around, so I don't. But, so, how's the committee, consensus of the committee, manager or administrator? Just sort of show of hands for, manager?
That goes with the form.
Okay. So we kind of settled that, that's good.
I have a question.
same accord with you guys.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the mayor is elected by the people.
Yes, sir.
City manager is appointed by his
It's hired
council.
by the city council.
Okay, so basically all he's gonna do is make, all his decisions gonna be budgetary. He's not gonna, he's not, so the will of the people, I'm just, listen, I'm not, I just wanna grab,
Yeah.
and y'all correct me, that's what I wanna get clarification on. So if he's on, if his main concern is budgetary, only numbers, it's not only numbers, I see your head shaking.
No, sir, he's not. That's just one small aspect, is working with
So-
the clerk to prepare a budget for the city
Okay.
council's
Okay.
consideration.
Well, listen, okay, let me just take this. If you sit in that position and you say, hey, we only got X amount of dollars for a school, blah, blah, blah. Is it just gonna be about the numbers, or is he gonna be about the people that actually go into this school? You know, and as well, me as a citizen, am I gonna have any input on his decision making? Or is he just gonna be making this decision based off of the internal workings of this committee? Who does he own? Do I have any power over him? Do I have any power over that person?
As a citizen.
Yeah, as a citizen.
I would say yes.
In his judgment, in his day.
What the process works, let me explain how the process works now, maybe that'll help you along
Yes.
a little bit. Right now, all the departments in the city are in budget workshop, time period.
Right.
That's, Teresa, Public Works Director, the Police Department, Fire Department, all the various public works, they are all in discussion workshops with the city clerk. I'm not sure if the mayor.
Under the direction of the mayor.
No, under the direction of the city clerk. So the city clerk heads up with that. She tells how much money is coming from the state, from the various funds, ad valorem money. That's why they have to delay it till they get all this back from Okaloosa County, the numbers back. Then she, has her figures from the state, how much money the city will have to work with. So they're in the process
Okay.
with the department heads of.
So even with that, even in that case right there, am I, Joe Citizen, able to tell him, I don't want you to put this over here? Or am I able to do that right now?
You when they conduct the public hearing.
Okay.
When the public hearings for the budget.
Is that the only time?
That's the only time. That's the way it works right now. It is, they
And
conduct.
that would be the way it would work in the future as well.
But they have budget workshops
Okay.
that the public is invited to attend.
Okay.
It's pretty well all out in sunshine and weather.
It would just be a matter of changing who formulates the budget
Yes. Okay.
and who's responsible.
I just wanna know where the average citizen will still be able to give his input. Who is he going to?
And you would still have access to your city councilmen, who are the direct supervisor of the city manager. And that city manager is always 3 votes away from being fired. So if, the manager is out there being crazy and doing things that he shouldn't, or she shouldn't be doing, and people start going to their city councilmen saying, what in the world is going on here? Well, they're going to fire their liability and bring in a new manager.
Thank you guys for just being patient with me so I can get that grasp on that.
I was looking over with the duties of the city clerk under this, the charter that was previously
What
proposed.
page is that?
On page 7. Under Article 5, appointed city officials. So that, when it goes to the administrator, the administrator and the clerk still continues to work to formulate the budget. Because the clerk is the person that brings in the figures, the money.
In this charter, I don't, cause when you guys put this together initially, was the idea to have everybody fall underneath the city manager who falls under the city council? Or did, department heads and the city clerk and the city manager fall under the oversight of the city council? Cause in what I've put together here, of course, the city manager supervises everybody, but here, the city council, it says, that the city clerk shall serve at the pleasure of the city council, which would imply that person
No,
is
this-
supervised.
This chart here would indicate that city attorney and the city clerk are accountable to the mayor and the council, as well as the city manager, who will be over the.
Okay, so that's the proposed, okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
My personal recommendation, after having talked to various city managers, would be avoiding that power structure, because it can create warring factions within the city. It's much better and much more efficient to have everybody come underneath of the city manager.
That's great. You know, and I think that's the way that it's, is written in the previous document.
Okay.
They all come under the, city council, and then the next step to manager, then all your department head plus the clerk.
Otherwise, it's like you're tying his hands. He can do some, but he can't do all. You know, because even in here, under the 5.04 in departments, the way it was written, it was, department head shall be appointed by the city council. You know, they should be, in my opinion, hired and fired by the city administrator. Now, obviously, the city council could possibly have a veto factor or something of that nature, or a ability to investigate, but by having an actual HR department, that would be, you know, they could go to the HR and ask, is there grounds, do we need to investigate this?
Well, you know, that might be time to talk about that. If we've got a human resources, that the person that's being tagged for termination, I guess you call it appeals, that person that you go through it for
Grievance,
grievance or appeals. We have that now, to go through the clerk's office, but the final appeal goes to the city council, if you have a grievance. So that's the way it works at this time, but to have some wording in there, however we recommend phrasing that, as it relates to termination, that your human resources person could be a step in that process.
Right.
Teresa, correct me if I'm wrong, but do we have an actual HR right now, or how is that actually constructed?
The city clerk has the duties of the HR person at this point in time.
Okay.
We have what's called a risk manager type, person, but what she does is handle the insurance forms and stuff like that for like workman's comp and stuff. She's not an HR person.
Okay. With that being said, I mean, that is, through this process, I think that is a liability that the city currently has that we need to lean forward on and possibly put verbiage in here to ensure that there's an actual HR department, because one sole person, having the yay or nay, and really, in the current capacity, not having a boss, you know, because her boss is the electors, the people, is not a recipe for success, in my opinion.
I'm in agreement, I'm all in for adding language, suggesting to the council that we add an HR department to the city government structure.
So maybe we could, amend this chart, just to have another block.
Yeah, and I have plenty of copies if you wanna have a working document.
No, that's fine.
With that being said, I mean, even in the business world, it doesn't need to be something huge and robust. A lot of businesses actually contract that job out to a secondary source, or a third party, I should say, who does it for a set fee. And that would takes the liability completely off the city. It puts a third party in between the grievance process, and just mitigates a lot of factors.
If I could just interject, the council, there has been members of the council that have requested, the data on forming an HR department. So they're interested in an HR department.
Okay, good suggestion. So we just go in our block, add a block human resources. I call it department, but it might just be an individual. But it has other duties.
Right. Who's even just there, that job is to interconnect and work with that third party as the city's conduit or the liaison.
Good. Good thought.
Now, your chart there, the HR person would be accountable to the city manager?
No, sir, he would come, he would work under the direction of the city manager. But he would flow through that person, and the HR would, I would say, probably make recommendations directly to the city council, or either go through the manager, whichever would be the proper flow for that. How does it work in the county, Carol?
Kind of both. We have an HR department, we have an HR director and several people who work in there for county operations. Most cities has an HR department with an HR director, and depending on how big the city is, they may have 2 or 3 or 4 people work for them. It may be a director and a clerical person, but that director handles all the classifications, handles all the advertisements, they do everything, and then they hand it to the city manager and he hires them. So it's that way. Yeah, they don't normally go, they make presentations in front of us, but the county administrator and the deputy administrator hires everybody. We don't hire anybody.
Okay.
And yet-
How about termination?
Same thing,
Same
same thing.
Okay.
Seeing some of the good of that is it also doesn't force that on to the commissioners.
Now, some counties and cities, by their design of their structure, is that some of them have their appeal rights. You know, some of them use PERC, where they go to the Public Employee Relations Commission directly, because unlike sheriff's deputies, they're actually employees, not appointees, and they have the ability to go to PERC and have a PERC judge. But a lot of counties or cities have an appeal right that you could at least have a review of the termination of the city manager by the council if you want to do that. You don't have to do that, but some cities have that. You know, where that'd be your first, before you go to court and sue somebody, you would get to go to them and serve notice that you intend to sue and have a hearing, and they might overrule the city manager, but that's kind of starting to be not so much as it used to be. I think they want him to take all the headaches and the brunt of it, and your elected officials not deal with it, but, you know, that's just as cities get bigger, that's kind of what they do.
Thank you for your comment.
Well, I'm still concerned about where in this process the HR person will be.
I think, under the day-to-day operation, he would be under the city manager.
Under the manager. as a
Fall under the
department head.
manager, but have the capability to speak directly with the council in
Well,
particular
that
circumstances.
would have to be explained well.
Yeah, that would be.
We can't just draw,
No, but that's
Square.
where, on the day-to-day, because he's probably gonna have other duties and responsibilities
Mhm.
other than just employee relations, like I say. Okay, so we'll have
He needs
to
to
have
be
somebody
focused.
smarter than us when we turn it over to the attorney, because we've already been advised, whatever we do, be sure we turn it over to the attorney and let them
Right.
clean up our draft. So, that's a good comment, good comment.
So one of the big takeaways from a lot of what we just had is to change this verbiage from appointing by the city council to appointing by the city manager.
That's good. And day-to-day, he would be responsible, but he would also have the ability to appeal that directly to the city council. Is that right?
Mhm.
Okay. And straight to the council. Okay. Okay, let's move on. Who else has comments? Okay.
In the section 5.04, departments, community services department,
That's growth management.
verbiage.
Growth management, okay.
It really should be entitled Community Services, but
So that is the proper verbiage as it is.
it should be, a line item on the budget made as growth management, so that's what we are. But community services really, entails more what we're supposed to be doing in our department.
One of the recommendations that has been passed on to me in the last couple of weeks is that public services has become very large,
Mhm.
very challenging, and that we should split Parks and Recreation away from public services and create its own department.
Parks and Rec used to be under growth management, which was administrative services for quite a number of years. So, it's, Parks and Rec have been several different places.
Yeah.
I've heard that as well.
That we should, that we've become a large enough city that Parks and Rec should be its standalone department. And this would really, aid the public services department and help them focus on public services such as providing water and roads and such.
It would be a great service to them, to have that stabilize some of it.
The reason that it's away from there now, it used to be a separate Department of Parks and Recreation, and it worked well. But under the charter, we had, some council members, who felt like our city charter, didn't speak of that. So everything come back to the Public Works Director. So he was the head person in the original charter, and they switched those duties back to him, to the Public Works Director. But just a few years ago, they decided that they wanted, the city council at that time decided they wanted the library to be a separate department, and that's really a small operation. It used to come under a different, scheme of things, but we won't go into the reason for it. It's becoming a department, of its own, but this really needs to be, I think, under some other, because there's only like 7 employees in the library.
And part of that reason was because the public services employees also did the maintenance on the grounds. And there's not enough, wasn't quite enough work, I think I remember hearing them argue, to have the recreation have a full-time maintenance crew.
One of the good things about having everything split up into different departments and divisions or what have you is that it's also better for the public. You know, it gives them more, instead of worrying about 3 different things, they're worrying about their specific job. They're worrying about parks and recreation. So where other things may go to the wayside, they can really shine on what they specifically do then, which could be very good for the community. Because I have had a lot of people speaking to me about just issues and dislikes of some of the different things with parks and recreation, city sports, et cetera. And if that was something that set group of people or city employees was focusing on, I think they'd be able to do their job a lot better.
Okay, so am I getting the suggestion that we amend the chart one more time, and that's good, because he has extra copies. So he'll working copy. And we'll, if you will, kind of
Do you need
word
to
that
write
how
a
you
copy?
would like to, no, I'm fine. I just said for other members that they would like to, scratch up theirs. Is to add another line, if you will, another box, and, where we've got the department heads, or maybe under department heads, separate that out
Correct.
into 2 departments.
Different, yeah.
Okay. So right now, in the chart, Teresa, her department, growth management, as they refer to it now, Public Works, Department, and Recreation all come under department heads. So the, suggestion is to separate those out.
To break Parks and Recreation away from public services and create its own department.
Any comments?
Are there any other larger, while we're on this, are there any other larger segments or departments that, you know, have multifaceted workloads.
I can't think of it. Teresa's department is, I would say, is the most complex.
But they all interwork within each other.
Yeah.
Like, your building inspection is dependent on your planning, which is dependent on your other, and they're both dependent on your code, enforcement, so they're interdependent. And we have less than 15 employees, so.
Okay. So the department heads, I'm gonna just divide that.
Big one, three, or
Yeah. Okay. And I'm not saying that administrative service needs to be a separate department. I agree with that.
It's a faction under the growth management now.
Does it sound like we're creating bigger government? I'm just asking.
No, I
Does it
think
sound like
what the question was, is being more accountable and responsible to the people, since the city, with their wishes and desires.
The jobs are already there, they're being utilized, but if we can make it more efficient, then by splitting them up and having them report differently, or having them really focus their efforts, but not hire, we're not gonna add.
The reason I'm saying this is because, again, when it comes up to the voters and they see this, we try to explain this, it's gonna sound like it's bigger.
I would say to the voters that we're not creating a bigger government, we're creating a better organized government.
Built on more efficiencies. It's gonna come to, it's ultimately, it's going to be the education of the public.
They're already doing these jobs. We're not creating, they're
The
already doing these jobs.
The only proposed creation here
The only
would
thing is,
be,
we're making it to where we can understand it. They're already doing these jobs. They
Right.
already got the people in place. I'm just saying, it's,
our only additions at this point have been HR
HR.
and city manager.
yeah.
But, so
And-
largely it's just better organized.
Mr. Chairman, is there a point that we can make comments from the floor, or are we, I mean, this is
think,
your meeting, I'm just asking, I got here late.
The next to the last agenda item
Okay.
is your public.
Thank you.
well,
I'm sorry to
have a
interrupt.
slide for that. Okay, but thank you for bringing that up, Ms. Parker. Okay, so, what next? What comments does another committee member have? Concerns about what was the proposed charter that was voted on one time?
This, I do have one moving on to section 6.04, election procedures. And I don't know where the legalities of this play in, but this is 2017, and how's it read? Newspapers published in the city for at least once a week, 2 consecutive weeks during the 30-day period of the beginning of qualifying. As we all know, the last election netted 353 people to come out to the polls out of 14,007 registered voters. It was a 3.6% turnout. And through a lot of individuals, voters within the city that I've spoken with, they didn't even know. Or it just wasn't published out. If this is the minimum and that is what is done, then that's the turnout. That's, unless you're involved, unless you're paying attention, you're not gonna know. I don't read a newspaper. I get everything off my phone. I don't know how many people even sit at this table, sit down at the table and read the newspaper every morning. So wording that would be tricky based on what we can force, or if there was a public notice board within the city, or I know it's been mentioned several times that it goes out with the water bill. Every month it's just on the water bill, it goes out, it repeats itself, and we can still do the publishment. It's going to cost whatever that printing cost is, but we're gonna get more people to know of what's even happening within the city.
What would you suggest that we do instead of just advertising in the newspaper?
Water bill would be one that we can
Okay.
control more.
Teresa has.
You remember in the past few council meetings, they were talking about, Quint Studer and the Mason-Dixon. That was one of the avenues that they were pursuing. That was what they were going to help fund, was the public appeal to your changes that are being proposed. And they had several different, suggestions there. The robocalls, which actually poll the people to know what their interests were in this particular instant. And, also to help educate, the public there. There were several venues that they were proposing, which a lot of it was social media, and a lot of it was public interaction, one-on-one, with, different groups. They had a whole list of items, suggestions, that would encompass probably 3 or 4 months worth of activities. And the water bill is one of them that has been suggested before, because it does go out to a lot of citizens. But there are a lot of other interactive, means which they have.
One thing that I do wanna be careful of is every one of those advertisement methods where I'll take all of them. I would rather have as many as possible, but all of those cost money also. So, the water bill's gonna cost money. If you do use social media such as Facebook or something of that nature, every bit of that costs money. So, we just have to be mindful of that as well.
Teresa.
It's usually a law for the newspaper ads, though. That's the reason you'll see a lot of our ordinance ads, and it's a state law, you have to have them published. Sir?
What, there's some kind of, regulation as it relates, I believe, about what the city can, or the city council can spend as it relates to promoting issues. You aware of anything like that? How much money they can spend to promote this issue? Is it what the law requires?
I
Or
would look
can
and see
they-
what we have now, but I don't know too much of a limitation
Okay.
there.
My only concern, and I do acknowledge the fact that voter turnout is currently abysmal, and it is a problem. My only concern here is that, addressing voter turnout and advertising elections and such, it's kind of outside the scope, and the mission of why we were established. We were established to look at the structure of government and make a recommendation to the city council on the structure of government. The other thing too is I would be reticent to tie the city's hands to having to do a certain set of steps, as far as advertising elections. And I think it would be better to address how we go about advertising elections in a separate, forum.
You probably like, right, I guess you need to go back to what our charge is,
Right.
for this committee. I have to find that one more time.
But
The
that's
only
not to
reason-
say that's not a problem.
The only reason I bring it up is because it's part of
Yeah.
the charter, and if we're doing it, it's something that is agreeable or something that
Yeah,
it's better to do it now
there's
than
nothing
kick
that
the
you bring
can
up that's
down.
not already here. Yeah, it's something that probably trying to expand on that is there. Yes, sir.
Okay, I was gonna look what we charge for food.
I've got it actually open, I was reviewing it. The purpose of the committee, the CCRC shall be an advisory body to the city council. The CCRC is established for the purpose of examining our current structure of government, to examine other various forms of municipal government, and to make a recommendation back to the council as to what structure they believe our city should have, and any changes that is needed to accomplish and facilitate the decision.
Thanks for bringing this up. Thank you. No, that's good, to keep it what we're charged to do. And all these other points are beneficial, but it's not our job. Nothing wrong with bringing them up,
Right.
bringing them up.
Is there a way we can have that as a mention at least, or, because it might not be done.
Because you
but it-
actually, in 604, you're actually talking about your
Talking about it.
notifications. So it will be relevant in
It's
that area.
outside of our scope, and if the council can be made aware that it's
Mhm.
something that we've discussed, but it's outside of our duty.
Who knows, they might be lying.
They may task you to do that too, so.
If we could, this could be worded in a general fashion rather than specifying, because our responsibility is not to say, you gotta use this media and this media and this media, but you general elections should be made public or publicized.
A broad spectrum publication?
Yeah. I was gonna say that.
Okay.
Good job.
There's no such thing in this
Okay,
area.
so,
I never even thought about
We
it.
don't have such a thing.
Yeah.
There's no one thing that reaches everybody,
No, that's true.
not today's world.
That's very true.
what's getting out, most of all, the individuals here tonight is our media, Tom Silver with what he'll be putting out tomorrow, on the city's website, Cal with his radio and Z-Files, and Ken with his CBC TV.
You notice that the newspaper gets the money and they're not here covering these meetings. But they're the ones who are required to get paid by state law to run these ads. They get it, what do
That's
you
a
say?
good point.
You know, but they don't show up to cover it.
They don't
Okay.
care, as long as that ad revenue comes in, they can do whatever they want, they're not accountable to anybody, trust me.
Now.
Maintain the media.
I mean, they tried to change state law to allow it to be on radio or internet.
I've
but
spoken
the newspaper lobbies-
several times.
Yeah, okay, we'll move on, so we're going to, adjust this
Calm
somewhat,
down.
within the document, which is in the framework. of-
We'll have time for comments afterwards.
Yes,
I'm making notes.
okay. So we've got,
Where are you now?
Let's go to, page 13, which is, Article 7. The charter is talking about, review in time, moving out to different recommendations, that the, council would, have a committee to bring, report on the process, report on, recommended charter amendments and the like, so that is included into that section right there, so, maybe we'll, if you've got any comments, we'll take them right now, or we can pick up with that next time we whatever the committee would like to do. We covered a lot of territory tonight, a lot of ground tonight.
I personally think a 10-year review committee would be great, because, the last charter, granted, it's had its battles, it's tried, it's law, it's failed, but things change and with time, and 10 years is a long time for
Yeah.
a city
I almost
to.
think 10 years is too long.
That's kind.
Could I throw out a suggestion, that when we meet again, we'll go back to chapter 7, Article 7, and pick up from there. We went through a lot tonight. If the committee is agreeable, we will, close out our comments and go to Teresa. Then, with Teresa, then we'll go to the public.
Ready?
Mhm.
Okay. We just have a few things. Our first is, of course, is, supplies. We have plenty of supplies, so, but if there's anything else anybody wants, the supply order will be going in tomorrow. Any other requests for data or research, we do have some things that are ongoing with that. And also I need to confirm the next meeting date, which is scheduled is August 17th. We need to also ask if the board wishes to have Dr. Jim Getz there to to, speak? Do you wish for him to come on, August 31st? Do you want other speakers? Do you want to speak with the mayor, the department heads, or someone like that?
If I may, I think we did get through quite a bit today, and I think we will be able to go through and then retouch on some of the topics that we might need to go through. So the minutes might have a little bit more stuff to read this upcoming one. And then we will also have a little bit more of this charter devised, and Dr. Gorsuch, very astute man in economics, the whole gambit. So I do think that he could even have possibly a copy of the two prior meetings and things we're talking about, and then he would be able to articulate his statements and tell us, hey, this works better this way or that way.
Yep. I talked with him, when he's en route, headed to Texas. We talked for a while, on a couple of different occasions, so, we will provide him with our minutes and allow him to come and speak. 17th or the 31st?
17th is fine with me.
It's fine by me too.
I think we need to move forward while we're moving to, get on through this process. We don't want to go so fast that we just jump over stuff, but we want to be thorough.
We do wanna go through.
We want to go thorough, but we want to work expeditiously and follow our timetable that the council has kind of tentatively set for us. So how much time do you think we need to allot for, the doctor?
I think you need at least a half hour, and you may, with questions, it may go at least, 45 minutes or more.
Okay.
So,
That's good. Then we'll schedule our other guests, like the mayor and maybe the department heads. They can give us like just a few minutes, and maybe we can cover most of them in one meeting.
So have the department head, so you do want the department heads and mayor, but have them on the 31st?
That sounds good to me. Because if we do that on the 31st, we just got our meeting in September.
To
For-
put everything together.
Make the
and-
recommended.
On the 31st, we need to kind of, surmise whether we want to ask for an extension, because we have to ask for that extension in a public hearing meeting, which,
Keep us up to date on that.
I would really like to stick to our timetable. I personally would. I think that asking for extension is, we didn't do the job we were asked to do.
Yeah, and I think so, and that's why I want the department to come in all at one time. It won't take them.
and limit them, maybe to 8 minutes, something like that?
I would agree. I would, if we can avoid an extension, let's avoid it, because this is gonna get tied up in the city council and tied up with voting and all that. I'd rather not be part of this later.
Okay.
And it may not
31st,
be
we can
beneficial to have the
leave that as-
department heads, your questions may be answered without that,
Yes.
which would be, give you another 45 minutes in one of your meetings.
Well, I think that's a good observation.
Mm-hmm.
Our purpose is not to hear from each department and try to understand what they do and how they do it and when they do it, but the organization.
Right.
What I would
And
utilize
responsibilities.
that time with the department heads for is sustains and improves the military, or pros and cons. What is working good? What needs fixed? I've talked to some, and that's where the HR department came up. But I wouldn't have had that experience if I wasn't talking to the people who are in those positions doing it daily.
Yeah, and that relates to back our flow chart, or our box chart, whatever you like to refer to, that as we add something, and the public works director maybe can tell us the pros and cons of his department, public services, and the recreation department. And because the council wanted to go back under that, under his direction, so that would work fine.
Okay, just a suggestion, you're limiting your meetings to an hour and a half. Would it be advantageous to, as you get more to your final time, to consider having a 2-hour meeting?
Well,
That's all.
I would be for, and I don't know if you guys stand, is let's just not put an end time on it, and when we end is when we end.
I think as long as we're.
I mean, we're not gonna talk to
In
them.
the meeting,
Right, I mean-
as long as we're moving along and everyone is contributing and everyone seems to be pleased with the activity or what's happening in the committee, we can stay extra time to get our work done.
I've seen so many county commission meetings, and city council meetings go well beyond the advertised end time, but we can set a time for it to end, and if it continues into overtime, it's.
If we agree to that, we set our own rules as we go.
Yeah.
And last thing, I have printed copies of Dr. Lux's PowerPoint if anybody wants a printed copy.
Okay.
And that's, oh, I did note,
Dr. Lux,
national.
did he get a doctorate degree?
I'm
Lux?
sorry, Paul Lux. I'm sorry, I got a Dr. Lux.
Yeah.
So,
I
and that
think so.
just comes that
You
just
put
comes
some
natural.
regalia on his outfit.
I'm
already.
sorry. Then Paul
He
Lux
don't
is
want
the
a
one who's
raise.
in here.
He will.
Although my Dr. Lux will come and talk. But national advertisement is very easily attained, even when we advertise for our CRA director, we did so nationally. So it's not anything that's out of the realm.
Any other comments from the board at this time?
I have one alibi, and this, I'm gonna need the approval, I've already spoke with them, I told them that I'd love to, but Brian Corlew from the Government Issues Committee with the Chamber of Commerce has contacted me, and he would like me to, give them a synopsis of where we are from when we started to current day. And that speaking engagement is on 9 August of 17, so the biggest thing is ensuring the city attorney blesses off on that, and that the committee also blesses off on that.
I don't have a problem with that, I'd rather it be you than me, but, I think if, go through Teresa and the city attorney, I don't know what kind of sunshine,
The rest of you have to stay home.
Don't worry, it's at 8 a.m.
yeah, so, but personally, I don't have a problem with it, but I don't want anything to do to jeopardize our bad publicity for our committee. So, if you will, coordinate that through Teresa and the attorney and get their approval as the board consensus of the committee. Rather be him than me. Okay, if we will, if no other comments from the board, we'll open it up to the public. Media?
Yeah, in regards to the people knowing about an election or not, I know there's been some comments that people didn't know about the last election. Well, I can assure you they knew about the election before that. The candidates spent over $25,000 on television advertising and lost because of social media. So you can't say that if they're telling you they don't know, you drive by Walmart during the election, general election, and you can't tell me that they didn't know there was an election, or they are just living in a bubble. So I think on the last election, when people said they didn't know, take a look at, and I'm not a personality, look at the candidates. You know, were they exciting candidates? Did they run an exciting election? Did they do anything? How many times did they go talk to me? How many times did they go talk to Cal? That has a lot to do whether people know what's happening with an election here in a local election or not. And I think that had a lot to do with this last one. People say only 300 people turned out, that may be true, but look at the candidates that ran and what kind of campaign did they run. That's my thing on that. I just can't understand when people say they didn't know there was an election, because if you go by Walmart's, that corner, you've got to know there's an election. It's plastered in every yard sign everywhere. So that's it. Comments that we've had tonight, this is sad, kind of the same thing. They're asking why you don't fix the roads, why you can't do more parks. On the screen during this entire meeting at the bottom it says Crestview Charter Review Committee. How much attention you people are paying out there, because that's at least the comments they're getting. Really not anything towards the charter, it's toward why aren't you fixing the roads? Why isn't this committee building more parks, that kind of stuff. I just want to let you know what I'm seeing out here. And then one thing that was a lot of discussion during the last two charter review committees, it made a lot of sense. There was a lot of just verbiage in the actual document that was just outdated. And so when people would read it, if you were an attorney or something, it was like reading some of these things on the ballot. If you're not an attorney, you can't understand it. So maybe it's one thing you guys could think about as you go through the different chapters of this thing and articles, the verbiage of it. Is it something that a normal person could read, understand when they read it? That was one of the big discussions during the last two, and you were on that one, we talked about it. That was one of the things, and I guess that's basically what I wanted to say. This is about the
Okay.
elections and.
I would make one comment, and maybe every 15 minutes, we should go back to our viewing audience and read what we're charged with doing.
When you read it, that was perfect. That got read 2-3 times during the meeting or something.
Yeah, and maybe we need to introduce that at the beginning. And as the meeting goes on, it's not about those specifics.
We're up to almost 900 viewers right now that have seen it. They're not all on it at one time, but during this thing, at least well over that now have gone to look at it. But you gotta wonder if they're really paying attention and listening, because we're not deciding about roads and parks.
Okay, but thank you for your input, Ken. Cal?
Why don't you let Linda go?
Linda?
And I
Okay.
have a comment after her.
Okay, Linda.
I was listening earlier about, your positions with recreation and it being separated. I was here at the time that it was combined. I agree that it does need to be a separate entity, as it has been for many years. But my question to you is, you expect to put the budget with that recreation when it is separated out? I mean, that's not your job to do, but, okay.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, that was combined, and it was combined, my understanding, with no funding going with it. Here's recreation, but recreation budget was not, did not follow that to Public Works for the operation, and to be able to handle it fully and capable of the needs for that. And we have many, much larger numbers now than at the time that was done. Whether it was right or wrong, that's not the point, but addressing it now and not taking anything away from Public Works, because they don't have enough to deal with funding at this point to do their job. But there needs to be some looking at if you bring it out as a department, which it should be, and the monies collected with it should be going into that fund for it, and then those monies spent on it, then we're not mixing utilities, water, sewer, those things that are absolute needs, but recreation is also a need. It's pay me now or pay me later. Police and fire they will be dealing with those if we don't deal with the children now, to consider that an absolute necessary event, activity. That's part of the public services and things, in my opinion, as a parent and a grandparent.
Well, that's why we would need a city manager with skills and background.
I'm just saying, not separating it out's not enough. That other step's gotta be there to be
Yeah.
sure that those funds are not taken from where they are now. But I'm not sure that Mr. Steele, he absorbed that department because it needed to be done, but I'm not sure that the funding followed that. So just keep that in mind.
That's beyond us.
I know.
Okay, it was identified that is going on and was considered as addressing
Put
that,
it
and I
on
think
your
we've made it a
suggestion
different line.
list or a look into it.
Okay.
Well, with a more robust Parks and Recreation, and you do get more user activity out of it, it's going to generate more revenue on its own also. But once again, yeah, that is beyond what we're going to do.
Any other comments, Amanda?
No, that was it.
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, I want to make sure I put on the record that I'm not speaking to you today as your county commissioner, because I don't want anybody to think that any county commissioner is trying to direct y'all to say that one thing's better than the other. I'm speaking to you, as a old-time resident of this community, and as a person that is a expert in public policy and actually own 2 policy consulting companies, and I've done this for other entities that are setting up. But just a few little points that I heard y'all talk about today, and I just want to throw some things out there for y'all to think about. First thing, if you haven't done it yet, make sure you go to the Florida State Constitution and Title VII of the state statute, 165 through 185 Florida statutes, where the structure and legalities and the processes of city government are spoken to in the law. Look at those because, as y'all already know from going through this charter, a vast majority of that charter is archaic, and state laws have changed, and between state law and administrative rules at the state and case law, most of what the city does is already set out there. And I'll talk about the brevity of what y'all are doing here in just a minute. Make sure you look through that and you'll get a kind of good feel more than what y'all are doing just looking at the charter. Second thing, I was a little concerned, not in the management philosophy of doing nationwide searches, but cities and governmental charters do not dictate nationwide searches. It's not done. They do it if they decide to do it, but you can spend anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 all the way up, in the case of some I've seen in local governments, $40,000 or $50,000 with search firms and national advertisement to look for somebody and then hire this great city manager right down here in Fort Walton Beach. So I would not put that in the charter. You don't ever, the charter needs to be brief and leave it up to the committee, the councilman to make that decision.
Right.
Third, the secret to this whole thing, if you're gonna try to appoint a city manager, is that you have the basic requirements. They're not elected, like Florida law, you can't put requirements on anybody that runs for office. But a master's level degree, now, I think, Josh, you mentioned like 10 to 15. I probably, if I was sitting where y'all were at, I don't think I would go quite that far. I would maybe go between 5 and 8 minimum years experience. And there's some language that you'll see in something that says an established competency leading cities, counties, or state programs or whatever, dealing with budgets, personnel, whatever. There's some language that's in some of these charters you can get. But to make sure, because, I mean, some of these young people coming out of college now with master's degrees, they've worked in government, but they're fairly young. They may only have been a city manager or county manager 5 to 6 years, but they're hot to trot. And you know, I appreciate this more and more as I get older. It's a young person's game. And the person that's gonna walk in here and be a new city manager, they're gonna be burnt the first 2 years of establishing and getting everything the way they want it. They're gonna be working 80-hour weeks. So, I mean, you know, you go hire somebody that's ready to retire, you're gonna probably be sorry. Also, I wanna make a comment on the mayor, because I want y'all to focus back just not too long ago. We were sitting here where we had some internal problems here that went on, and although the mayor was over the police department, there was a bunch of things going on, and he was undermined once he found out things were going on by this group that sat right up here.
Amen.
He was undermined, and he was threatened, and he was stopped from doing a lot of stuff until he could figure out how to get it done. And it is a very good thing that you have a mayor that has the authority, and he would act kind of as the inspector general. Now, I'm not talking about like just an EEO, somebody didn't get a job or something, personnel might do that. But when there is corruption, or there is major things occurring and somebody needs to look at it maybe before they go to law enforcement, having that mayor with that authority to do that outside of this group is just like a veto. It's a checks and balance on the power that sits up here. That is very much needed. Y'all were talking about the calling the different things like in Teresa's shop. State statute already talks about local governments, counties, and cities. I would stick as close to the wording of the state statute as you can. It already, you know, growth management is called planning and development. It's in the law. Public works is called public works and services. Whatever's in the statute, so there's no confusion with lawsuits, liabilities, all these laws. I would make it what's in state law. Now, public funding, y'all mentioned something kind of curious. Now, unless there's some case law or something that's changed, the city cannot spend public funds to lobby for any charter change. You can pay to put it on the ballot, But unless something's changed, you can't go pay to run stuff and say, this is a charter we want, that's illegal. You have to go out and get a PAC or the community groups to pay for that. Which you can go out, you can have citizens establish a PAC and they can go run it, but, these guys can't take our money and say, we prefer this better charter, we're gonna spend a bunch of your tax dollars that need to go to public works to this charter. Unless something's changed, I think that's prohibited. I would suggest to y'all, because of the charter change you're looking at, a lot of charter review commissions do field trips. I would strongly suggest, and field trips are fine, you just publish them that you're gonna go to that meeting instead of this meeting. I would strongly suggest, as a group, y'all book yourselves, and if y'all need the little van or whatever, go down to Fort Walton Beach. That's the closest one that has the form of the council, with the mayor presides over. He's a presiding officer, but he doesn't vote. You can see how that works, how the city manager, the mayor, and the council interacts, and you can see the way they do business. I would strongly suggest y'all do that, because I'm like y'all, I'm a visual and a hearing. I have to see and hear what it is, instead of just looking on a piece of paper, and then it kind of hits home to me. And then my last comment would just be, our charter is so, I'm just gonna tell you, it's so bad. It's one of the worst ones I've seen, and I hate to say that because I was raised here, but it's one of the worst charters I've seen in government. New cities, they try to keep the charter very, very short. I've always heard the saying, if you keep the charter down to 5 pages, it's best. Refer back to state law, where you can, in accordance with whatever state law is, where you are judged by the courts and administrative processes. If it was me and I was sitting where you were at, I would have one big request, that I'd do a strike all amendment, and I'd strike red through the whole thing. And then I would go and rebuild it the way I want it to be. And that's just some thoughts from me, but Ben, whenever y'all have time to talk to him, y'all can pick him apart a little bit about how y'all wanna do that. But if you're not careful and you try to do minor amendments to that old charter, you're gonna have way more than you'll ever be able to describe on a ballot. So making the charter brief and to the point, and you've got city doctors and city this and city that haven't been in effect since the 40s or 50s. So all of that, and like I said, it's a terrible charter. It's terribly written, it's poorly written, it's not easy to follow and understand, and we deserve a lot better than that, and we deserve it to be simple enough. When the public wants to go on that web, and y'all said something about lawyers, I'm not worried about the lawyers, I'm worried about the public. What does our city charter say? They should be able to get on there and read it, and literally be able to look and say, okay, this is who we have, this is how they get there, this is what their powers are, and then there will be sections that they'll say refer to state statute and state law such and such, and they can go look at state law. You don't incorporate everything in there that's already in state law. They did that back in the old days, because the state laws weren't near, thank goodness back then, we didn't have so much state law, but now there's a state law just about for everything, almost everything. So that's just my comments, and I just offer those as, just from my background experience, and like I said, this isn't coming from the county commission, this is just from me personally, and we do appreciate all y'all's hard work, and I do personally, to help this community here in this city.
So we catch your drift. Thank you
Thank you
very much. Any other comments?
Chairman, can I ask a question? Mr. Rankin, is it possible to, in your experience, can you simply, like you do an ordinance that you're gonna change extensively, we do a repeal and replace of that whole entirety?
That's what I
Is
said,
that-
that's what I said, strike all.
So
I'm
strike
using
all-
state legislative, but strike all amendment means that you strike the
That
whole
is
document
that
and
is
you
the
rebuild it.
repeal and replace, right?
Repeal and replace, same thing, but we're not talking about Obamacare.
That-
Yeah, and we hope y'all don't have, the issue with that. But yes, that is, when I
That
say
is
strike
how-
all amendment, that means that your
You can't-
proposal will be to strike the entire document, redline the whole thing, and make a new document that hopefully will be very shorter and more succinct to what you do, than what's there, correct?
I just wanted to make sure I was understanding exactly.
Okay.
Thank you for your input, and having heard Graham's comments, let me ask Teresa while I've got it on my mind. Teresa, do you think, hearing what Graham said, that you could possibly obtain some shorter version from somewhere? whoever has a shorter version, League of
Okay.
Cities, whoever.
I will.
And I think we all kind of know where we want to go, but if we can come back with a 4-page, something to look at.
Now, I was being facetious, I doubt you'll get it in 4 pages, but hey, if you can, I'm gonna write a book on that.
Very tight, very tight.
Yeah, That was more philosophical.
We'll
yeah.
take 10
But it can be
pages.
shorter than what you got, I'm
10
sure.
pages.
Okay, to
It's a-
compress it, okay.
compress it, bring it back to us, and we can take what we got, and maybe it'll work right into what she brings back as a sample for us to go by. It's like redoing ordinances. Don't write them new, and just take somebody who's got one that really works good,
Cheap,
and put your name
don't
on it.
reinvent the wheel.
Mr.
And,
Chairman.
put it up for advertising.
Would the board also want copies of the state laws and state statutes and our constitution? I have those, so,
If it's not too lengthy.
okay.
Well, it'd be a lot of paper, if you can look at it on, I mean,
That's
it's,
what I'm saying, we're gonna,
yeah, that's a lot of paper. Lot of paper. But
I
I'm
know,
just
we gotta
saying, as y'all
read it,
look
we gotta
online,
read it.
if you're sitting at home and you got, on the weekend, you got time, I would just say go look at it, then you can print out per section. Or if you have a certain section that you read, write a note, you can print that, but you could be talking about 50,000 pages, for all y'all.
Okay, any other comment from the public?
Yeah, mine's gonna be relatively short and sweet. I don't go into the depth that our,
Bring it.
county
Commissioner.
county commissioner has, got in his depth. I like the block diagram. The one thing I see here, and this is me, as I've lived here since February of '91. At that point in time, from the research I've done, the city of Crestview had approximately 10,000, just over 10,000 residents. Today, we're over 24,000. We've more than doubled in 26 years. We've grown, we need to change our government. You guys are on the right track, in my opinion. We need a professional running the city manager. We have professionals running the department heads, the police department, the fire chief. We need a hired city clerk, not someone who has the coffers to win an election by popularity, getting their name out in front. We need a true professional city clerk. I'm not putting Ms. Roy down at all, I'm just saying that she may be the most qualified that applies. I don't know. But we need to look outside of the scope of Crestview. We got Okaloosa, we got Walton, we got Santa Rosa. Some of them may want to come here because it's the right job, and they might be the right person for the job. I know of all the subject matter experts, SMEs, these department heads, like under the regular department head over at City Works, which still has sub-department heads, work in different work centers, and so they got the right people telling them what to do. We need that at the higher level, where the city manager works at the pleasure of the city council. So when the city manager screws up and they can't come to reconciliation, then the council by majority vote says, thank you for your service, you're no longer needed. Again, I've seen, like I said, I've been here 26 years, that's not as long as some, and that's longer than others. I will say one thing, and I don't mean to rub any feathers here. Mr. Connor, I had reservations at the very beginning when a council member appointed a former council member to be on this committee. I was seeing visions of good old boy effect. I am glad to say I'm not seeing that.
I appreciate
That's
that
right.
comment.
That's good.
Like I said, I've seen, and one of the biggest problems we've had over the 26 years I've been here is the Council of Five have been accused of being a good old boy farm. I'm not seeing that today. Back in March, I saw it come together when the citizenry came in here and complained very loudly, and immediate action was done that night. In this case here, like I said, I have some reservations. I kept my mouth shut. I sat back and I watched. I think most of you will remember, I've been here for most of these meetings. So I want to thank you for keeping an open mind, and I like where you're going with this.
Thank you. And I really thank Graham for his comments tonight. He has, with his prior jobs associated with the state, in law enforcement and all those various things, in contact with the Tallahassee officials, he brings an insight that I don't have, even though I have 20-something years in government, but I don't have the insight that Gerald has it, and I thank him for coming and sharing this information with him. And having said that, any other comments from the board, Calvin, Mark?
Yeah, I'll wait for the end here. In looking at your chart, and one of the comments I heard from down here is, will the public perceive we're making government bigger by merely having more department heads? I happen to agree that, well, some of the needs are needed, but what you ought to ask, and maybe Teresa, you could do it, I'd recommend you need to look at, what will this government cost? What's gonna be the cost of this newer but improved method of running our business? I can't imagine a $35 million a year business running in the way that city governments, this one and some others, have actually tried to manage themselves, you know. And I have seen, and I think in your new charter, the wisdom, I have seen a council president tell the girl cutting the grass how to change the way she cuts the grass. And going by at least 3 supervisors between the council and her on the job, and that's behind us. Recreation needs to be its own. One of my issues with our recreation program, and I know why, those people multitask up there working for Wayne between recreation and other things that they all have to share doing. This recreation program does not promote itself to its citizens, except for an occasional sign on the CVS billboard there. We get, every week I get once a month from Destin, we get about a 6-page thing from Milton, from Defuniak and Walton. We get their reports of what's going on every day for things. Now, yes, it's on the city website, but just like a Facebook page, we all got one of those. Not everybody goes to the one central one. I would doubt that we probably had more hits tonight on Ken's webpage, Facebook watching this, than the city Facebook page gets in a whole month. I just bet you so. But knowing that you should get to know, you create other department heads, they're gonna want to expect to be salaried at the level, and I saw that happen with the library, when that became an own department, all of a sudden there was a big jump in the pay scale. So now these other 2 department heads, we're gonna have an HR person and a Parks and Recreation department head. They're gonna wanna be in the same pay with the other department head, or close to it. You know, based on maybe, that's what their seniority is, that's just something to think about. I have observed voter turnout in elections. My first election I actually worked in was 1952. I was a messenger on the floor of the Chicago Convention when Adlai Stevenson and Senator Richard Russell of Georgia, Ernest Kefauver of Tennessee were the final 3 top names on the roll calls. And I remember we carried messages. They didn't have, you took an envelope from one chairman of a delegation, and I didn't realize till a few months ago when I got reading about it, I remember the Idaho chairman gave me an envelope and said, take it over to Illinois. And I handed it to the guy. I went over to where the sign was and gave it to him. And about 10 minutes later, there was an announcement that Idaho was going to, they had voted for all 3 of those different candidates, and they were within handfuls of votes of either it was gonna be Kefauver or Adlai. And Illinois then announced that Idaho has changed its vote, casting all of its votes for Adlai Stevenson.
And you were involved in
And I carried that piece of paper, I guess. But I watched city elections as a radio man, a newsman. Municipal elections, unless you're in a monster city and monster issues, 25 or 30% is a good turnout. Now, there was a time when this county city elections were on the general election ballots or the primary ballots, but they always, as Paul Lux pointed out to you, they were at the end of the last page, and their final drop-off of voters gets down to nothing. I don't think there's been a 25 or 30% turnout in this city since I've been here, since '03, and probably others you can remember the last time there was something over 30% voting for any city election, right?
You just don't have.
I mean, and there's all kinds of reasons why we won't just take on, but you know, but the history of our voter turnout is what it is. Now, how we can promote them, Ken and I, and even the newspapers will take the paid ads and run it, but getting them actually to show up. Now, I want to go to 2 things in this charter. I don't know if you actually made a decision tonight on page 6 how you can have a president and a vice president, I heard Ellis mention it, and a mayor running the meeting. How the president and the mayor can both, why they need a president and a vice president.
We discussed that, but the mayor is really not the person that, is involved in the procedural running of that meeting, and we asked that that be corrected.
Yeah.
That the mayor.
But I think you're talking about the Fort Walton style, which, I mentioned where the mayor would run the meetings or not?
No, sir.
No, you're gonna take that part away from the mayor. Okay. Now, the other thing I noticed, and this was, and I know I sat in here in the meeting when there were some nights there was just 7 people up there and staff and me. And McKinney came to most of them, we missed 1 or 2 only, but we were at most all of them. This precinct commission, the Crestview 3, now fortunately, of course, the voters will vote at large, but these precincts are so out of balance in population. Your precincts are everything north of 85, and then the 2 divided by 85 south of 90. I mean, everything north of 90 is 1 precinct. And of course, in the next 10 years, the growth is gonna really change again. So that, I don't think this is in the current charter, is it, this precinct commission idea? Wasn't that something added with this charter? That was something new, and it's something that is needed. And the idea where once you get this, if it gets approved, that you do go back and every 10 years review it, and after every census, it's just like reapportionment should be done, it's done on the county and state levels, within 2 years after the census, your city precincts, your charter needs to provide for that too.
I won't do it tonight, but next time we meet, I'll address what Cal was talking about. We'll go back to that time and tell you why the charter is like it is as it relates to the times. Okay, any other business from the floor? Any other comments from the committee? We have a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
We stand adjourned. Thank you for your